A little-known fact about the Titanic: the ship was bone-chillingly cold. Welcome to our video. If you were asked what the most famous ship in history is, what would your answer be? This is an absolute secret. Is that the legendary Titanic? The history of this ship is always full of mysteries. Initially, it was a symbol of hope and national pride, as well as evidence of the. However, not long after that, Titanic became the source of a heartbreaking tragedy. That nostalgia is hard to put into words. It was the day the Titanic sank to the ocean floor. The ocean will forever remain one of humanity's greatest sorrows. Even though more than 100 years have passed. Many years have passed since that tragedy, but no one has been able to forget, and people still follow the journey of the fateful ship. Today, join Tuyat Matt as we explore fascinating facts about the legendary ship, the Titanic. Everyone may know of it, but not everyone understands the heartbreaking truth hidden behind the Titanic tragedy. On the fateful night of April 14, 1912, at 11:40 p.m., the Titanic. Amidst the vast ocean, the legendary ship collided with a colossal iceberg. The impact was horrific. This crack caused a fatal tear along the ship's hull, rendering the vessel completely unsalvageable. Before me lay a carpet waiting to be unfurled. In just a few short hours thereafter, from a symbol of luxurious and sturdy as it was, the Titanic quickly turned into a terrifying nightmare as the colossal ship began to sink. Slowly sinking into the icy depths of the ocean. By 2:20 a.m. on April 15, the Titanic had broken in two. The ship split in two and rapidly sank deep into the ocean in just a matter of minutes, claiming the lives of over 1,500 people. In the depths of the ocean. In that critical moment, the crew of the Titanic did everything they could. Their ability to send out emergency distress signals. The radio signals were transmitted in their desperate situation, they still clung to the faint hope that some ship would receive their signal and come to the rescue. Fortunately, their distress signal was finally. The ocean liner RMS Carpathia received the signal. Immediately, it changed course and raced off at maximum speed. However, even though Carpathia raced against time to reach the disaster scene, the considerable distance and harsh weather conditions meant it took them an hour and a half to reach the destination. When the Carpathia arrived on the scene, the crew witnessed only a horrifying sight. The legendary Titanic had vanished completely. The scene was truly horrific, with debris scattered everywhere and sparse survivors desperately clinging to life on boats. At the time of the tragedy, the Carpathia was present to provide rescue. However, among the thousands of people on the ship, they were only able to save 710. However, the events aboard the Titanic were made even more heartbreaking by a little-known fact is that at the time, the RMS Carpathia was not the ship closest to the Titanic. At approximately 12:45 a.m., just after the Titanic detected the issue and collided with the iceberg, the officers on the ship detected a faint light from another vessel in the distance. SS Californian was not far from the Titanic, close enough to clearly see its distress signals. At this distance, had the SS Californian responded immediately, they could have reached the scene in time to save most, if not all, of the remaining people aboard the Titanic. However, the unfortunate thing was that the SS, the Californian, did not respond to the distress signals from the Titanic. The captain of the Titanic tried to get the attention of another ship by firing white flares into the cold night sky. The astonishing thing is that the officers on duty aboard the SS Californian actually saw these distress signals. They immediately reported the incident to the captain. But unfortunately, that captain failed to grasp the severity of the situation he was facing. He merely thought those flares were a routine signal from another ship that had stopped to rest on the ice. No action was taken to respond to the distress signals from the Titanic. The only person who could have grasped the severity of the situation at that moment was the wireless operator aboard the SS Californian. Unfortunately, he was off duty and not at his post. The consequence was a gravely misguided decision. The SS Californian ignored Titanic's distress signals and remained stationary in the icy waters, instead of immediately proceeding to rescue the stricken vessel. Today, historians and Titanic experts all share the view that if the SS Californian had responded promptly and moved to the scene of the shipwreck, they were able to save many people, even nearly all of the more than 1,500 victims who perished on that fateful night. That is a painful truth and a costly lesson in the importance of remaining constantly vigilant and prepared to respond to emergency situations. The victim's fate remains a mystery, and the search efforts have yet to reach a conclusion. Whenever a global tragedy occurs, thorough and complex investigations are certain to be conducted. The sinking of the Titanic was no exception, and shortly after the legendary vessel plunged to the ocean floor, a series of investigations have been launched to clarify the events that occurred on that fateful night. If one were to rely solely on the official figures, it would be natural to assume that the number of victims in the shipwreck had been clearly determined to be 1,514 people. However, in reality, this issue is far more complex. The exact number of victims to date remains unknown, with estimates ranging from 1,490 to 1,635 people. This contention stems not only from statistical errors but also from other complex and unpredictable factors. Most investigations into the Titanic disaster have encountered significant obstacles, even though the event occurred over a century ago. The identities of all victims in this tragedy have not yet been fully established. When the bodies were recovered from the bottom of the Barents Sea, it was discovered that many passengers had used aliases to board the ship. This made the process of identifying the victims extremely difficult. Additionally, the Titanic carried passengers from numerous different countries and territories. In the chaos and desperation of the shipwreck, compiling a list of survivors was also fraught with difficulties, leading to unavoidable errors. It is hardly surprising that identifying each victim proved impossible, and the mysteries surrounding the fate of many passengers remain unsolved to this day. If you have the chance to visit Fairview Cemetery in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, you will see over 100 graves of the unfortunate victims of the Titanic disaster buried here. But what wrenches the heart is that among them, nearly 30 graves remain forever nameless. They are but cold stone stels, lying silently in the vast cemetery. They departed in silence, no one knowing who they were, where they came from, or what their lives had endured. However, what is even more surprising is that the investigations are still ongoing, and the hope of identifying those unknown victims has never faded. A prime example is that in 2008, after several decades, one of the last unknown tombs was finally identified. Thanks to the application of modern DNA testing technology combined with a global-scale genealogical search, researchers have identified the remains of a child who passed away at just 19 months old. That child had waited for a long, drawn-out 96 years. But in the end, that unidentified body was finally identified and given back its name, Sidney Leslie Goodwin. It was a deeply moving moment, closing a chapter in the story of the Titanic. And that child's family could finally find solace in their grief. But at the same time, the remaining anonymous graves stand as a haunting reminder of the unsolved mysteries, and of the fates that were forever lost with the Titanic into oblivion. The lack of lifeboats was a grave error, and its regrettable consequence was that heartbreaking tragedy. When designing any type of vehicle, passenger safety is always the top priority. Engineers and designers always make every effort to respond effectively in the event of accidents, to ensure that as many people as possible can be rescued in the event of an accident. However, in the case of the Titanic, a grave mistake was made, leaving catastrophic consequences that no one could have foreseen. At the time of her launch, the Titanic was not merely the world's largest ship, but is also regarded as a technological marvel thanks to its extraordinary transport capabilities. With a capacity of up to 3,547 people, this figure was truly astounding, making the Titanic the pride of the maritime industry at the time. Fortunately, on its first and fateful voyage, the Titanic was carrying only 2,224 passengers, well below its maximum capacity. A figure that is still far below its maximum potential. However, that does not mean the number of lifeboats on board was sufficient to ensure the safety of all passengers and crew. Initially, the designers intended to equip the Titanic with 48 lifeboats, enough to ensure the safety of all passengers and crew members. However, the ship owners opposed this for reasons related to aesthetics and comfort. The decision was made to reduce the number of boats to just 20. This is a highly subjective decision that has overlooked an extremely important factor: human safety. Each lifeboat on the Titanic could only hold approximately 60 people. This means that only about 1,200 people could be saved, which is less than half of the passengers on board. The official reason given by the shipowners for equipping a sufficient number of lifeboats was They would take up too much space on the deck, obstructing passenger walkways and blocking the view. Born in a stunning ocean, in a world where beauty and comfort are celebrated. Just as no one could have imagined that such a tragedy would actually occur. Everyone was absolutely confident that the Titanic, the unsinkable ship, everyone believed that the Titanic could have remained afloat long enough to carry out rescue operations. However, the unfortunate reality proves the opposite, precisely that collision with the iceberg. Drifting into that fateful night, everything changed completely. The firm belief that the Titanic would not easily sink was utterly shattered. That became a fatal mistake. In an emergency situation, immediate evacuation is absolutely critical. All passengers needed to be evacuated immediately, but the lack of lifeboats led to. That night, a disaster beyond imagination occurred, claiming the lives of more than 1,500 people. Not only because of the collision with the iceberg, but the root cause also lies in a misguided decision made from the very beginning. Prioritizing comfort and aesthetics over human safety has resulted in an extremely costly lesson. Never underestimate any factor when it comes to human life. The drill was cancelled, and a mistake led to the tragedy. On large vessels, organizing rescue drills is an indispensable part of the safety assurance procedure. These are drills where the crew and passengers are instructed on how to handle emergency situations. The crew will be trained to proficiently master the skills of preparing, launching, and operating lifeboats. While passengers were instructed to evacuate in an orderly manner, to remain calm, and not to panic. These drills are not merely a mandatory procedure, but a vital element to ensure that all passengers on board have thoroughly memorized the emergency procedures. Typically, on seagoing vessels, life-saving drills are conducted at least once a week, and maybe even more frequent if necessary. The Titanic, the most grand and advanced ship of its time, was no exception to this. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic departed from Southampton. A lifeboat drill was scheduled for April 14 as planned, just 4 days after the ship had left port. This is a very crucial period, because after a few days of drifting at sea, passengers and crew members are already familiar with the ship, so the drill will help everyone prepare to respond promptly should an incident unfortunately occur. However, a strange event occurred on April 14. For an unknown reason, Captain Edward John Smith ordered the cancellation of the lifeboat drill. This was a surprising decision, and to this day, no one has been able to explain why he acted that way. Unsinkable. Perhaps he believed the Titanic would complete its maiden voyage smoothly. Some others believed that he thought there were only 3 days left until the trip concluded, so organizing a drill was unnecessary. Whatever the true reason may have been, the decision to cancel the exercise led to extremely serious consequences. When the Titanic struck the iceberg on that fateful night, neither the passengers nor the crew were prepared to handle an emergency. There had been no prior drills, so in the chaos of the night, no one knew exactly how to act. This lack of preparation led to erroneous decisions in the evacuation efforts. Some rescue boats, despite having a capacity of up to 60 people, were launched carrying only half or even less than half of their permitted number. This means the survival chances for many people were gone. Furthermore, the chaos and lack of organization made the evacuation efforts extremely chaotic. Due to the lack of specific instructions, the passengers were confused about how to proceed, and the crew members also faced considerable difficulties in operating the lifeboats. This significantly increased the death toll from that fateful night. If the rescue drill had not been cancelled, the outcome might have been different. Perhaps more people have learned how to handle emergency situations, thereby increasing the number of lives saved. The decision to cancel the rescue drill on April 14, 1912. It remains an eternal and heartbreaking mystery, while also serving as a costly lesson on the critical importance of always being prepared for the unexpected. Those courageous musicians played until the very last moments. The Titanic is renowned not only for its colossal size and immense capacity, but also as a symbol of an era defined by luxury and opulence. The ship was adorned with exquisitely crafted interiors, spanning from lounges and reading rooms to smoking parlors and even a gymnasium. All exude an air of opulence, created to serve the upper-class passenger clientele. Among the crew members serving on board, the talented chefs certainly deserve special mention. Attentive service, skilled bakers, and on top of that, an 8-piece band. Those who have etched their names into the history of the Titanic with an eternal mark. one of the fortunate second-class passengers who survived the tragedy shared. That night, many acts of courage took place, but none were more admirable than those of the firefighters. When everyone around was drowning in fear, panic, and chaos, the brave men still held firmly to their instruments. Amidst the nightmare, gentle melodies rise like a soothing whisper, bringing a moment of peace to the soul. Though they knew their fate was already sealed, they never ceased to play. They only wanted to borrow the wine to somewhat lessen the horror of that brutal situation. Scientists have proven that music possesses a special power. It can soothe the soul, ease fears, and provide comfort in life's final moments. It is for this very reason that they resolutely refused to give up. They played on like that until the fierce waves swallowed the ship and claimed their lives. Each note that rises is not merely a melody, but also a final farewell. A work that touches the heart, dedicated to the souls lost on the fateful ship Titanic. None of the other 8 workers survived the disaster. They sacrificed themselves to kindle faint rays of light in the night of destiny. After the shipwreck, only the bodies of the 3 scientists were found. And what wrenches the heart most is that the youngest among them had just turned 21. A young man with a future full of promise. Their actions not only symbolize courage, but also stand as a powerful testament to the immense strength of music. Even when staring death in the face, the tragedy could have been avoided. David Bly truly is a rare and fortunate individual, because he was a junior officer on the Titanic. But in a last-minute twist, he was removed from the crew list of that fateful ship. This decision not only saved his life but also etched an indelible mark in the history of the Titanic. For it is perhaps only he who has the ability to save this colossal ship from disaster. At the beginning of the 20th century, ships at sea were not yet equipped with the advanced technology of the modern era. To detect potential threats from a distance, visual observation plays an extremely important role. And binoculars are an indispensable tool for sailors. However, on that fateful night, the crew of the Titanic could not access the binocular storage room. Because David Bly, who should have been the second officer, had left the ship in a hurry. And he forgot to return the key to the binocular storage room. It was still in his pocket. Without binoculars, the guards on the ship could not spot the iceberg in time. And when they saw the iceberg, it was already too late for the Titanic to change course. If only there had been a pair of binoculars on the ship at that moment, hundreds of lives could have been saved. This becomes even more heartbreaking as it reveals a truth that, sometimes, even a small mistake can lead to a major tragedy. The Titanic seemed destined for a tragic fate by a series of mishaps and errors. From the lack of preparation to the misplacement of the binoculars key, everything conspired to make the tragedy inevitable. That night, more than 1,500 people lost their lives, and many believe this tragedy could have been prevented. Had it not been for that unfortunate chain of events, David Bly could have been saved by the last-minute change. But perhaps for the rest of his life, he would be haunted by what might have been if the key had been turned in the right lock. The unsinkable woman, Violette Constance Jessup. At the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, White Star Line was considered one of the largest global maritime shipping companies. Famous for its giant and luxurious ships, in 1907 the company decided to build 3 new ocean liners. With their superior size, they are expected to become the new symbol of ultimate luxury and safety at sea. Of these, Titanic is the most famous name, but the other 2 ships, Olympic and Gigantic, later renamed Britannic, also have equally notable legacies. However, the fates of all 3 ships were utterly tragic. They have gone down in history with heartbreaking stories, becoming names synonymous with disaster. But the strangest thing was the appearance of a woman named Violette Constance Jessup aboard all 3 ships at their most critical moments. Born in Argentina, Violette Jessup was not an overly famous flight attendant, yet her life was intertwined with unbelievable events. To the point where she was dubbed Miss Unsinkable, the woman who never sinks. Violette's journey began on September 20, 1911, when the RMS Olympic was involved in a collision with the cruiser HMS Hawk. Although the incident did not result in any injuries, it remains an unforgettable memory in her career. At the time, Violette was working aboard the Olympic, and this event was only the beginning of her fateful encounter with the 2 other ships of the White Star Line. In 1912, when the Titanic embarked on its maiden voyage, Violette was once again on board, working as a stewardess. When the Titanic struck the iceberg and began to sink into the sea, Violette was fortunate enough to board a lifeboat and escape the tragedy. Though she survived, the horrific memories of that fateful night were forever seared into her mind. Not only that, during World War I, Violette continued her service as a nurse for the British Red Cross and was assigned to work on the Britannic. At this point, it had been converted into a floating field hospital. On November 21, 1916, the Britannic sank after striking a naval mine and was destroyed. However, Violette once again miraculously survived the disaster. Violette Chessup became a living legend by surviving 3 major shipwrecks at sea. She was not only a direct witness to the most horrific maritime disasters in history, but also the embodiment of resilience, extraordinary courage, and a fortune few have ever possessed. Initially, Violette had no intention of joining White Star Line. However, after persistent persuasion from her friends, she finally agreed to work aboard the Titanic, hoping it would be a breakthrough for her career. Life journey, many can. It could be said that her life was a series of unbelievable events, predetermined by a most peculiar fate. Violette surviving 3 horrific accidents was not a mere coincidence, but rather an inspiring story of a woman overcoming life's most severe challenges. The unshippable miss. The quiet dedication of engineers often goes unseen, yet it is the very foundation upon which our modern world operates smoothly. They are the ones who design infrastructure, develop new technologies, and solve complex problems daily. Their work demands meticulous attention, patience, and an untiring work ethic, often requiring the sacrifice of personal time and well-being to ensure the safety and efficiency of every project. That sacrifice deserves to be acknowledged and valued, for it not only creates products but also builds the future. We have discussed the large number of crew members aboard the Titanic. Now let us acknowledge this reality and pay tribute to those who did not hesitate to sacrifice themselves to save others. There were approximately 900 crew members on the Titanic, but fewer than a third of them survived. Among the victims, all the engineers perished because they no longer had time to save themselves. The personnel team consists of 25 engineers, including 6 electrical engineers, along with 2 boiler operators, 1 plumber, and 1 administrative office staff member. While the deck was awash with panic and fear, they remained below in the boiler room. They had to struggle to keep the pumps running to maintain power and push water out of the ship. They fought death inch by inch on that very vessel. The engineers had no desire to give up, but most of them likely failed to realize they were merely postponing the disaster, not preventing it. However, these individuals remain a testament to the courage, bravery, and spirit of dedication of the city of Southampton. In the south of England, there is a memorial built to honor them. This is the complete